Is that all you got?
What's good, everybody out there on YouTube? This is your man Shadicstick dropping some hot faraga on this mic. Today we are going to be talking about Pokemon Sword and Shield, and more specifically my thoughts on it. I guess I'll put this under a review, I guess, but this is more just my thoughts on the game because I'm doing this off of the dome and how I feel about what I've played so far, because I've beaten the main story. I just haven't beaten the post game yet. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know I just recently made a video a few weeks ago talking about why I wasn't buying Sword and Shield at launch. The gist of it was basically that I didn't feel like as a consumer I was going to get my $60 worth out of the game. Thank God I didn't buy the game for $60, but more on that later. I just wanted to preface this video saying if you enjoyed the game, you enjoyed the game. This is how I felt about it, and you can disagree with me on points, but I'm not sitting here trying to tell you why you should or should not enjoy the game, or why you shouldn't have enjoyed the game. That's not the point. The point of this video is for me to get my thoughts out on the game and where the series should go in the future, and how they can just really fix a lot of these issues. So let's begin. The first major issue comes with the gameplay in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Now, a lot of people are on the side of we should have had all the Pokemon, and a lot of people are on the side that we didn't need all the Pokemon. I definitely believe we needed all the Pokemon, and that's mostly because the game kind of gets repetitive in some aspects because they don't want to give away a lot of the Pokemon because a lot of them are evolutions of other Pokemon, but at the same time they want to show off that there are a lot of Pokemon in the game. I think the biggest example of this is in the wild area, because in the wild area you run into a lot of Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, but it gets repetitive because once you've seen one area, you know every Pokemon that's basically in that area, unless it's a really rare, I guess, spawn rate, like say for instance Lucario. It's going to be really rare that you see a Lucario walking around, but outside of that, there's not much of a reason to go around searching in the wild area outside of seeing maybe a Lucario or an Evolution in the wild. And that's kind of one of the biggest issues of Pokemon Sword and Shield. It just gets really repetitive. Once you go on a route and you see like the first two Pokemon, that's what every trainer on that route is going to have. They're going to have those first two Pokemon and maybe like one of the more popular Pokemon in the area, like some variation on the Corviknight line of evolution or something else. And that's not to say that every area of the game is like this. It's just that so many of these are like this that you can take up one Pokemon in your party, put it at the head of it, and for like the next 20 to 30 minutes, you'll be fine because you'll be one-shotting everything in that area. I just think it becomes too predictable and too repetitive in a way, so that once you get, I guess, a handle on things, you can really just cheese your way through the game. And it also makes the game shorter because there's no real challenge in the game. I didn't lose any battle in the game. Like, I never felt stressed out because I knew I could come back in any battle. And if not come back, just wipe the other person's team because I knew what they're going to have. If there were Berserkers and Leopards in the area, every trainer was going to have that. I wasn't worried about winning. I just put my Pangoro out the front and have him use low sweep the entire way through. I just feel like they should have took more steps to add all the Pokemon in the game so that issue wouldn't become prevalent, because this is something that you realize is somewhat of an issue in previous titles. They are more willing to mix it up in those earlier generations. I'd say gens 1 through 4. Once we got to Gen 5, that didn't become really an issue at all. I mean, before the post game in Gen 5, it may have been, but it just feels like the game becomes too formulaic. In those previous games, not every Pokemon trainer would have the same like 2 or 3 Pokemon in that area. They may have one Pokemon from that area that they really, that the devs were like, oh, we got to show up this Pokemon here. But never has it felt like this formulaic where I just know every Pokemon, Pokemon trainer's layout in the area. Some areas aren't like this though. Some areas are really well thought out, and in that respect, I really appreciate what the team did there. It's just that I feel like a lot of these games issues are because they take half steps and not full steps. I do really like that they make the game, they add a lot of quality of life benefits, like your PC, you don't have to go to a Pokemon Center to access your PC boxes. They're just all available to you like in Pokemon Let's Go. On top of that, traveling is a lot easier. You don't have to have Fly or some ride Pokemon to access, fast travel. And on top of that, you have the bike really early in the game, so getting to places fast is a breeze. I honestly appreciate stuff like that. I do feel like it should have been in previous entries, but again, I appreciate that. On top of that, I appreciate their initiative to make it easier to train your Pokemon and get them competitive ready earlier in the game. You can change natures more easily. You have more access to items that allow you to, raise your EVs and stuff like that. I never really felt like I would have been pushed into a corner had I gone super hardcore into the competitive scene with this game to be rebreeding Pokemon left and right. It never felt like that. On top of that, they made Pokemon breeding easier because they give you 2 different daycare areas. So guess what? You can breed more Pokemon more quickly. There's a lot of things this game does to make, I guess, the experience feel a lot snappier. I will say that. But in that regard, I don't think the game's view grew to match that, especially when you add things like the bikes. Because some gyms are literally just, or some like major towns where the gyms are just feel kind of like a straight line to the next area in that regard. And on top of that, some of the towns look really big, but they're really small. Like, you may be able to enter like 2 or 3 places in that town, but outside of that, you can't do anything else but battle the gym leader, and once you go there, you're done. Literally, one of the towns is a hallway with the Pokemon Center, and then the gym is at the end. That's it. There's another town that's exactly the same. But then you have other towns where there's a bunch of houses and stuff to go into, and there's a lot of stores and stuff to go around and look at. It feels like this game is stuck on handheld experiences rather than having that full AAA console experience. And that's what I want from a $60 Pokemon game. That full AAA experience. If you're gonna have the AAA price tag, give me the AAA experience. I do like, however, things like the Pokemon dens and the raid battles. I just really wish it was easier to get into them with other players, because you can play them by yourselves, but it's no fun when you can't play them with other people. Like, you sit there and you wait forever because they don't make it really accessible to others to hop in, or make it accessible for you to hop into someone else's. You have to hope that invitation pops up on a little communicator thing, and then you have to go through hordes of other stamps and messages just to find them. It's just that it feels like this game doesn't have enough things cohesion wise to really meld well. On top of that, I want to go back to the wild area. The wild area is not that big, because once you've explored most of it, you explore most of it within the first 7 hours of the game, and then after that, the only areas you really have to explore are the small little areas with water, and after that, you're basically done. It's honestly crazy when you think about it, because you'd imagine that the thing that they advertise the most, the wild area, would be the biggest part of the game, but it really isn't. Yes, there's stuff to see, but once you've seen all the Pokemon, you've seen them. Some of them rotate on a daily and weekly schedule, but outside of that, most of them are going to be the same. And I like that I can see other players in the wild area, but if you go online in the wild area, the game can't really handle all those people in the area, so you see people popping in and out, and you see a lot of people, you see the game's frame rate tank. It's just kind of a mess in that regard. I just really wish they could have done more to polish that. On top of that, when you look at gameplay additions like Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, you rarely get to use them. I'm gonna be honest, you don't really get to use them at all. You can only use them in the Pokemon dens, which you're not gonna find a ton of them across there that have, raid battles and stuff where they're gonna be useful to Dynamax in, or just in general, just finding them. And then there's gym battles and 2 or 3 story battles that you're able to use Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing in. And it's really a disappointing thing when they've removed things like Mega Evolution and Z-moves. And I know the whole timeline thing, etc., people are going to tell me, I know for continuity's sake, but they should have had them in there in some capacity. Because it really just feels like I'm playing bare bones generation 1 through 5 Pokemon. Not even 5, I'll say 1 through 4 or 1 through 3 Pokemon, gens 1 through 3. That's what it really feels like, because we didn't get any additional battle types like we got in Generation 5, where we got rotation and triple battles. We didn't get anything cool like that, and Dynamaxing just is not, you don't get to use it enough. I just really wish there were more situations where you get to use it, and it really frustrates me because you don't get to use it all that much, despite it being one of the selling points of the game. It's why add something when it just winds up being not used at all? But let's shift gears. Let's talk about the graphics for a little bit, because that was one of the big points before the game came out that people were talking about. This is the biggest mixed bag in this regard, because some of the places look nice. I won't say like great, but they look nice. A lot of areas of the game look nice, but a lot of them look horrible. Like they just, the wild area, for example, the wild area looks like poop. It looks like doo-doo. The textures are all really low resolution. The models do not look like, they literally copy and pasted the same tree all over the place. They copy and pasted the same Ocarina of Time tree like 100 times. And they could have done a lot better. I'm gonna be honest with you. They really could have done a lot better, but they didn't. And that's the issue. We know that Game Freak can do more than this, but they didn't take the time or effort to do better. And that's what's upsetting. But then there are times when you see the game and you can tell they really put some effort. Like one of the ice towns at the end of the game looks really nice. And then there's this mine in the game that looks really nice. But when you're stuck with a lot of stuff, especially at the beginning of the game, less so at the end of the game. When you get towards the end of the game, there's a lot less of this, you know, rough looking game and more of a decent looking game. It's just like, it's mostly just terrain and environments, because the Pokemon look alright, they look decent, and the character models look decent, but everything else just kind of just falls apart sometimes. And in battles, sometimes it looks decent, but sometimes the camera's broken. Like if you use Hattern, like the camera angle's too high half the time in the battle, and I don't know why. I guess they have that Pokemon reading higher than it actually is, or bigger than it actually is, so the camera angle's too high. Or there's some moves in battle where the animations just look god awful. They like the animations for those moves should not look like that in 2019, where there are other ones that look great, like Pyro Ball or No Retreat. But then you get things like Double Kick, and you're like, what are you doing, Game Freak? And then some of them just kind of break. Like, if I remember correctly, like, I think one of the biggest offenders of this is not Bite. It's something, it's like either Bite or something like that, where the trainer model will be behind the Pokemon, but it'll disappear momentarily and it'll just pop back in out of nowhere, and it's really distracting. I just wish they could have taken the effort to really polish this game's animations and everything and make everything just look cohesive, because the quality of things are just too drastic it just in comparison visually. Like you're like, oh wow, this is a $60 game sometimes, and oh wow, this is like a 3DS game. It's like, why? This shouldn't be an issue in a series that's the highest grossing series on the planet. This shouldn't be an issue at all. I will say though, if we're talking outside of graphics and we're moving on to music, the music is amazing. They did a great job with the music. They did a really great job with designing Pokemon and designing characters. I really like all that stuff. It's just like the graphics are bad. And sometimes there are audio issues, specifically when you have Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, where the sound effects will just be way too loud. Like I'll be playing it on my TV or whatever, and then suddenly I have to turn the TV like almost all the way down because the sound effects for Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing are too loud, or some moves just become too loud. But let's move on to things like the story. The story is the worst the Pokemon series has ever offered. Now, I'm gonna talk about some specific things. Let's get the rival out of the way. Hop is not the worst rival the Pokemon series, like the mainline entries, have seen, but he is definitely like the second worst in the set of rivals we've gotten. Like, Hop's existence is just losing. And I hate that, because he talks such a big game, but just always loses. And it's annoying that he's always there, but always loses. He exists only to do that. He's not as bad as like the X and Y rivals, but he's almost there. And he's better than the Pokemon Let's Go rival, but again, those are really low bars to beat. He just barely beats them. And on top of that, by the way, there's going to be more, there's going to be some story spoilers here. The story is just poop. Team Yell is the worst team we've gotten in any game. I don't care how you look at it. They are the worst team. They are worse than Team Flare. Again, X and Y has one of the weakest stories in the series, and this game beats that. It has, actually, let me correct myself. X and Y has the worst story, and this game beats X and Y in that regard. It has a worse story than X and Y. Like, Team Yell is literally, people like to make the joke, oh, they're toxic fans. That's literally all they are. Sometimes you fight them and they're actually doing something good. Like, there's this one point in the game where they're trying to protect some Pokemon, and you beat them up. And I'm like, why did we beat them up? They were actually doing something good. Why? Because some people wanted to get to this area where their Pokemon were, doing something. Like, it's just, they make no sense. And then the reason they give you for the team being the way they are, it's like, oh, they're somebody's lackeys or whatever. And they're just really dumb. Like, I feel like Bede should have been a rival, and I feel like we could have gone without a team in this game. I really do. And then on top of that, we have the villain in the game. And I'm not going to expose this part too much, but when you find out, well, you kind of already know who the villain is at the beginning of the game, but the reason why it's such an issue is because there's no build up to it. It just kind of happens. The bad guys revealed, and you're just like, oh, okay. There was nothing building up to this point. I was kind of like beating people, and I was going to become the champion. And then, this happens. Like, what's the point? Like, everything in this game just feels pointless outside of you beating gym leaders to go fight the champion. Like, that part of the game is fine, but anything outside of you fighting gym leaders is just really, really stupid. And I don't understand why. I don't know why they couldn't have at least hit the bare minimum of what X and Y was in this regard. There's no real character development for any of the characters. Like, literally, the champion is Leon. His fault is that he's bad with directions. Or in the case of what Hop said, he is pants with direction. I didn't know pants was an adjective. Like this game just, like, I like the English accents and stuff they put in dialogue, but then you just like, what's wrong with the story writing? Like, what's wrong with it? This is hands down the worst story in a Pokemon game, period. I'm gonna keep it real. And another thing this story's lacking is voice acting. And I wouldn't be as hard on the game for not having voice acting if there weren't literal cutscenes in the game where the characters' lips are moving and they're just standing there and they do all this graphical effects stuff to make it actually look pretty good. And their lips are just flapping with nothing coming out, and you've read all the text because it's like a line of text just sitting there, and they're sitting there and they're wasting time because they're trying to emote and they can't emote with their voice because there is no voice acting. Like, if there was at least voice acting, I could justify the 60 in some regard. I feel like the story might have even been better, because especially at the end of the game when the bad guy gives his speech, you're like, oh wow, that could have been, done well if, we had some man with a gravitas voice, sitting there saying something. Like, it's crazy. I honestly don't know what went wrong in the writing department for the story, but it's just garbage. I like some of the characters. Like, I really like Rayhan, I really like Nessa, I really like Melanie for obvious reasons. But it feels like there was so much that could have been done that wasn't done. I really feel like this game just, if it had a year, if it had one more year, it could have been amazing. But instead, we just got a bunch of half steps in the right direction and then just some setbacks, like in the story. Like, there's no reason why all the Pokemon shouldn't been in the game. There's no reason for that. Like, they could have removed Mega Evolution and Z-moves and I'd have been fine as long as all the Pokemon were there. I could have got over certain things like, the game being short if the story was amazing. But if you've been hearing people say, oh, I've beaten the game in 10 to 15 hours, they did. I beat the game in 20 hours. I'm pretty sure 10 of those hours was because I switched over to Netflix and forgot to turn the game off. There was literally a time where I watched Netflix for about 6 hours and forgot to turn the game off. And because of that, I was like, oh, wow, there's like an additional 6 hours on my playtime. Where did this come from? I don't remember it. And I was like, oh, wait, I left the game on. It's just like Pokemon Sword and Shield makes me so mad, not because it's like an awful game. It's a functional, solid game. I'm not going to say it's a good game. It's a functional and solid game, but it should be more because of the status of the series and because that raise in price tag and because of the hardware it is on. We have games like Super Mario Odyssey, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, all on the Nintendo Switch. We just got The Witcher 3 coming out on the Nintendo Switch, full in on the cart. There is no reason for Pokemon to have the issues that it does. And it's really aggravating. Like, I don't hate this game, but I don't love it either. Like, every single Pokemon game before, I've loved it in some capacity. Like, I really have. I love Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5, Gen 6, and Gen 7. But Gen 8 is that generation where I wasn't hyped for it, and it really upsets me. Like, I worry for the Diamond and Pearl remix, but at the same time, I don't, because I feel like these half steps are gonna become full steps with that remake, or with the sequel to Pokemon Sword and Shield in this generation. The Emerald to these games, Sword and Shield, like the Ultra Sun and Moon to this game, Sword and Shield, the Sword and Shield 2s, whatever we get in the future, I feel like we'll rectify all these issues. It's just that I'm upset this game had to exist in the state it does. But I don't know, that's how I feel about the game. The game is just a bunch of half steps, and it's really disappointing coming from a series as acclaimed as the Pokemon franchise. But I don't know. How do you feel in that comment section down below? I'm genuinely curious, because I've seen people enjoy the game, and I'm really happy that people enjoy the game. It's just that I can't enjoy the game in its fullest, because every time I start to enjoy it, it just disappoints me. It really does. This is me, your man, Shadicstick. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Follow your boy on Twitter. He's been popping off on there in terms of posting stuff, just talking about stuff. Like, I've been talking about my thoughts on Sword and Shield so far on there up until now. So you really should check out my Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. My Discord link is in the description. But this is me, your man, Shadicstick. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'm trying out a new editing software, so if some things are kind of jank or different, just know that's why. We're out of here. Remember, Hot Faraga turns to Cobra Zaga. Make sure you chill out with some of my other videos. See ya, Space Cowboys.